As you all know, I'm Lena, head of platform at First Momentum, and today our guest is actually Markus Börner. Super nice to have you also, Markus, who will talk about how startups are tackling the issue of shortage of workers in logistics. Markus, you actually have extensive experience as an investment manager. You worked before at Seeded Speed. You then founded basically Prequel. So together with your partner, now really looking to transform supply chain to make it more transparent, more sustainable. Really interested to hear more on about this also during the talk. And of course, your background is in economics, and you studied in Estonia, which is really interesting for me. So, one side note, if someone is interested to learn more about Estonia, probably. But really nice to have you. One small note before I hand over also to you, Markus. If you haven't seen it, we have in June coming up the spin-off summit. So make sure to spread this also with everyone that could be interested in this. We will actually have really cool speakers lined up with, for example, the founder also of CureVac, but also really other interesting spin-off founders. So just as on an internal note. So handing over to you, Markus. Looking forward to the talk. And as always, feel free to put questions already in the chat, or also, I think if Markus, you're fine, raise the hand during the session. So it's really interactive. Otherwise, we also have a longer Q&A in the end usually.
All right. Thanks for the introduction, Lena, and thanks for the invitation also. And good to see you all on the call. I will share my screen in a second and share a few slides. And Lena already mentioned the topic, and I think now you can see it, right? So today's topic is battling labor shortage in logistics, and I will try to give a structured approach to this issue and how we think it should be tackled, about our thesis. And to do that, I will give you a little bit of context about Prequel Ventures, in case you're wondering why I'm sitting here and talking about that. And then we will dive deeper into the problem itself, explain a little bit why it is hot now, and then we'll talk about challenges for the industry, not only the challenges of workforce shortage itself, but also the challenges that incumbents face when trying to solve it. Then we will show a few key angles and a few key players in the space. And afterwards, I'll conclude with a few theses that we have when it comes to finding good investments in the space and essentially tackling the problem. And you're all invited to discuss and get feedback there. And I think we go ahead with that. So Prequel Ventures was founded by myself and my co-founder two years ago, and we are a specialized fund in logistics and supply chain tech. We invest almost as institutionalized angels, if you will, so very, very early stage, small tickets, but with a lot of vertical focus, right? And as supply chain spans for us from really sourcing and procurement, including all the processes and steps that happen along the value chain, logistics obviously is a very big part of that. Here a few core topics and investments. Today we will more focus on the industrial automation part actually. How we work is we are supported by a bunch of great people who are advisors to our fund, that is industry executives, but also founders of scale-ups. We do a lot of content work. Everything is downloadable for free on our website. Feel free to check it out. And with that, we can dive straight into the topic, I think. So workforce and labor shortage in logistics. To give you a little bit of context there and level the playing field at first, when we talk about labor shortage in logistics, we're essentially talking about blue-collar workers. As an exception, not about office and desk workers. And we talk about two main areas. And the first area is warehousing. That means like storing and handling of goods and materials, right? So putting them into racks, storing spaces, retrieving them, packing them, sending them on their way, right? And then transportation of goods. And when we talk about transportation, that includes all modes of transportation. It means like trucking, sea freight, air freight, and so on and so forth. But as an example case for this session, we will focus a little bit more on road freight. That means on trucking, because the shortage there is the biggest and the most severe. To give you a little bit of context and numbers here, why does that matter, and which workforce shortage at all? So for the transportation sector, there's a few industry association that publish quite useful numbers, and the interesting thing here is that the average truck driver age in Europe, which is by the way the oldest truck driver age, the average age in the world, is 47 years. But what is even more severe is that 33% of all truck drivers in Europe are older than 55. That means that they will leave the active workforce most likely within the next 10 years, right? And not after 10 years, but within the next 10 years. That means a good portion will already begun in the next 5 years, right? And this situation is combined with another situation that we don't have enough truck drivers even today, with all these people still being part of the active workforce, right? So there's roughly 400K unfilled truck driver positions across Europe, right? And there's a little bit of a fluctuation here and there, right? It goes with economic cycles, but it's still quite a good average number. So roughly 10% of the total jobs there are not filled yet, right? So, and that will increase naturally with if you take a look at the age numbers over the next year. So it's expected to roughly double within the next 5, 6, 7 years. And at the same time, that is the transportation and trucking area, right? And at the same time, we're facing a very similar issue on the warehousing space and an adjacent area, right? The demographics and the profiles of people working there are very similar, but I chose a few different KPIs here to just give you also another angle of the problem. And the first one here is a very high turnover rate, right? So oftentimes for truck drivers, but also for warehousing personnel, you don't have the best labor conditions, right? So you have very high turnover rates. People do the job usually for money because like it pays their rent, not because they are super passionate about it, right? And these high turnover rates are actually a problem because that also increases your own hiring efforts, right? And you only have like part of the workforce up to speed all the time because you're lost in onboarding and upskilling the workers, and then after you've done that, a few months later they are already leaving again, right? And this is super severe. And actually, still, besides that, and besides a current shortage of warehouse workers as well, we still see a growth in the need for warehouse workers, right? We see like underlying trends, like the overall growth of e-commerce, again, moving economic cycles, right? But still, that transition to e-commerce requires people to handle all these shipments that are sent, right? So you have a few underlying factors that even increase the need of workforce. So when we do due diligences, right, and when we talk to companies in the market, we also often consider the opinions of incumbents, and there are a few interesting quotes in the presentation here. One is from a head of operations of a 3PL. That means like a logistics service providers doing third-party logistics, so logistics for others. In this case, for very big e-commerce players in Germany, and they basically said like 5 years ago we pursued automation projects to increase operational margins. Today we do automation just to get the job done at all, right? So it's not only because it's not only about like increasing operational efficiency, but the problem is that you don't find enough workers to just do the job and handle the goods. So when we look at that, there are basically three solution strategies to the problem that you could think about, right? That is increase recruitment performance, right? Like find new people, increase worker efficiency, and eventually automate. Those three differ, and also their solution quality, right? So if we think about increased recruitment performance, there's something that does not require a lot of tech, right? You could do just like a very easy thing and increase wages, for example, right? But you could also try to do a few tech-enabled approaches, like hire internationally, right? You could use anything that translates documents and so on, automatically onboard people in different languages and so on and so forth, right? It can be tech-enabled, but it's usually not very high quality, because you don't solve the problem at its root, right? You can also increase worker efficiency. That means like use and utilize the existing workforce even better, right? For trucking, what you could do is increase utilization rates of trucks, right? A lot of trucks drive around half empty, right? With only like, for example, 67 to 70% load capacity utilized. You could try to find a way to increase that utilization. Therefore, you would not need more trucks and also not more truck drivers, for example, right? And you could do a very similar thing for warehouses. You could just like find modes or things like industrial variables to increase worker efficiency, to enable a single person in a warehouse to handle not only 20 goods in an hour, but maybe 30 goods and parcels in an hour, right? And the highest quality solution would be automation, right? So use autonomous systems to tackle the problem at its core, and not use human workforce at all. And when we look at it from a venture capital perspective, obviously the high quality solutions are the more interesting ones for us, right? So from an investment perspective, we are not super interested in the first one. There might be. Oh, I see there was a hand raised.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you, but Mike, go ahead.
No. I would ask later. I just raised my hand to just to remember that I have a couple of questions.
Okay. All right. You can ask now later, like however you like it.
So keep it for later.
Okay. Yeah. Then
let's keep it for later, right? I think maybe they will be picked up during the talk.
Okay. So as I said, like from a venture capital perspective, we're not super interested in the recruitment perspective thing. But more in the later parts. Also, this framework of looking at workforce shortage, you could apply the same thing to not only like logistics, right? You could apply the very same framework and way of thinking to developer shortage, for example, right? You can also say, okay, well, if I have a developer shortage, I can just try to hire more developers, have, for example, a workforce marketplace. You could increase worker efficiency by providing them good dev tools that increase their coding efficiency, right? And you can also use, for example, Gen AI approaches to produce code through software, right? So that would be like the automation approach. So it's a very similar and parallel structure, right? And if there is automation possible, then the recruitment part gets less and less interesting, even though profiles might change a little bit, which adds another perspective. So knowing this, you might say, okay, well, this is very obvious. The only thing we have to do to tackle workforce shortage is just automate everything. And then you Google warehouse automation, you find a lot of cool tools out there, and yeah, you could say, okay, problem solved. But the thing is, if we look at the reality that the industry presents us, then there are more than 50% of all warehouses out there that fully rely on manual processes, right? Even in 2024, there are hundreds of people just like putting one parcel from a shelf to another location, driving forklifts around, and so on and so forth. And the even more interesting part, or even shocking part, is that more than 50% of these people have no intention to change it at all. So the question that naturally comes to everyone's mind is why, right? And the reason for that and the root for that lies within a few inherent challenges that the industry has, right? And I will present you 3 examples in the following slides. There are a few more, but I think the first 3 are the most severe ones, and we can discuss more of that later. So the first one is also introduced by a quote here from actually a tier one automotive supplier in Germany, like 5 billion euros in revenue company, is a very, very big one, right? And the head of logistics of a warehouse near Munich actually told us, well, for this respective warehouse, they employ 2 FTE whose only job is to search items that they've lost in the warehouse, right? So then you might ask, okay, well, how can that happen? How can they lose something in the warehouse? And the truth is that a very significant number of companies, so it's roughly 40% of all the warehouses out there, run without an IT infrastructure. And when we talk about IT infrastructure, we talk about warehouse management systems, right? That's the core of the warehouse. So very simplified warehouse tech stack is you have an ERP system and an enterprise resource planning system, right? which aggregates the enterprise level, the order flow, right? And then below that, on a warehouse level, you have a warehouse management system. What is solved there is there's kind of an inventory management aspect. There's the task handling. So you steer and control your workers in there, all the workflows within the warehouse, the order fulfillment, and so on and so forth, right? And then there's a few layers below that when it comes to machine control and in the end, dispatching jobs between different automation technologies and so on, right? But 40% of the companies out there don't even use a WMS, right? And that's a huge problem, because without an existing IT infrastructure, you cannot automate anything, right? If you don't have processes in place, then you cannot automate anything. The second problem is that there's a super high fragmentation of WMS landscapes out there. You have a lot of legacy players. So in most of the cases, there is no open API. You can like think about EDI integrations, but sometimes things run on premise only, for example, right? And if you have no cloud control, then it is also super hard to, for example, steer robots from the cloud and so on and so forth, right? So there's a few inherent challenges with the tech stack. The opportunity, like, okay, how do we solve that? Yeah, we can try to think about new WMS systems, right? And plug and play systems, and then you can ask the follow-on questions, and you can go on and on there. Okay, well, why is there no system in place for that? And the reasons are, okay, clunky legacy software, long sales cycles, hyper individualization for each process, and so on and so forth. So you can try to solve that technically, but this is a key requirement to tackle then the workforce shortage thing, right? So if this requirement is not met, you can also not automate anything. Second of three parts and takes here. Actually, another quote from also a 3PL company, so again, a logistics service provider, more than 4 billion euros in revenue. And they told us basically that they've looked into automation technology, and they've already automated a few warehouses with AutoStore. It's like one of the market standard solution in the current times for automating bigger warehouses. But after receiving an offer and taking a look at CapEx and time to return on investment, they decided to go back to the market and continue looking for personnel, right? So even when faced with a severe shortage and an issue, like the CapEx thing was just too intense for them. And why is that? Well, because if you look at the industry, it does play a huge role. If you operate a business below 10% EBIT margin, then you have to be very, very sure that if you invest, that you calculate right? Because like there's almost no margin for error, right? And most of logistics businesses, in trucking, it's the same thing, by the way. You have like EBIT margins of 3 to 5%. Fulfillment is a little bit better, 3 to 7 usually. And with 3 to 7% of EBIT margins, most of the people out there rather not invest anything. And then the second problem is CapEx intensity and ROI cycles. So oftentimes how the business works is that you set up a warehouse for a very big client, and you have like a 5 or 10-year contract. But if your ROI just starts kicking in in year 12 or so, you have to be willing to take risk, right? And this is not something that is inherent in their industry. So how can you change that technically, or how can you solve that technically? Well, you can try modular robotic concepts, right? If it's not a 0 or 1 decision, if it's not automating a warehouse or not automating a warehouse, but if you can find something in between, automating specific tasks, for example, then we might be talking. And that's what also works or could work is hardware as a service, right? So kind of aligning the automation and the investment that is required with the business model of the customer, right? So their business model is being paid per parcel they fulfill and then send out. And if you align the investment with that, for example, with pay-per-pick models or something like this, then you also like have a better angle of approaching that. Last challenge for today, and there are a few more, but just to get back to the trucking part, we of course have tech readiness and regulation, right? Because automation only works if there's a feasible automation tech available, right? And of course, for trucking, the most obvious thing to automate is having autonomous trucks out there, right? But there you have a regulator dependency, right? You need the EU or whatever regulative authority you have to approve the whole thing. And you cannot do much about it. And of course, you need like trucks and autonomous technology that is ready, but you can start early. And a few examples that we found there is, for example, starting autonomous driving in very specific areas that are exempt from regulatory environments. That means, for example, yard trucking is a huge thing. There are truck drivers that whose only job is it to drive trucks around yards of big warehouses each day, right? There's different areas for different trucks if they get unloaded, loaded, or just in waiting line, right? And you can, for example, automate that with approaches like Fernride or others. So this is it about the key challenges that we see. Maybe a few key players, and then we'll conclude with a few key theses about how to move forward from here and where to find good investments. So I mean, you saw already on the slide, you saw a few opportunities that you can find within these challenges, right? And here are just a few more. And this map is not meant to be complete by any means, right? It just offers a few different angles. And what you can also see from the number of companies here, I mean, it's not super representative, right? But naturally, you find more venture-backed approaches and more promising approaches on the right-hand side, right? On the automation side, than on the recruitment performance side. Starting from left to right, what we see when we're talking about recruitment performance is everything that like is kind of leaning into the job marketplace direction, right? Workforce leasing, onboarding of people with foreign languages, but what we also see is concepts like truckers that enables kind of truckers to open up their own business and find contracts and so on, trying to attract a new, more entrepreneurial kind of workforce in the trucking industry, or concepts like HFM in the warehousing space, who focus more on the onboarding part and getting workforce up to speed, which doesn't solve like the problem at its core, but at least it gives you a higher output if your workforce is quicker up to speed, right? Then the increased efficiency part we see for the trucking and transportation part, we see a lot of optimization algorithms, right, for routing, and also for like space and capacity utilization. That's the thing I already explained before, right? And in the worker efficiency warehousing world, we see actually a lot of wearable tech. So we see German bionics there, for example, with an exoskeleton. We see hand-free scanning devices, because like usually if you scan a parcel, you had this like one-hand scanner, and then you scan, you put the scanner away, and then you need both hands for your parcel, right? Costs you 2, 3, 4 seconds more than just like scanning with a hands-free device that you, for example, have on your wrist, right? And when we talk about like optimization, we talk about seconds for each parcel, right? So this is another approach there. And then the most exciting part for us is really the automation part. And when we talk about automation, that means both hardware and software. I will come back to that in a second. And there on the transportation part, we see, okay, autonomous trucking, software and hardware providers. We see autonomous delivery approaches with delivery robots. We see drones rising, right? So there are a lot of different use cases, and there are the obvious ones, like, okay, you can build a robot to do the job, and you can also like build the software to make the robot autonomous, to navigate, right, and so on. But there are also a few more non-obvious cases, for example, fleet management and utilization there, or communication between autonomous trucks and the destination they are arriving at, right? So yard management systems and so on and so forth. And on the warehousing front with the automation, we have a few very prominent players in Europe already. We have AutoStore and Exotech, which are like, I think, the most mature players. You can't even call them startups anymore. But we also see newer, younger players rise, especially in the software field. There are a few hardware manufacturers as well. Magazino, for example, offers robots that can move shelves, for example, right? Cellomation offers conveyor belts that can steer items in different direction, identify them, and so on and so forth. But then we see also, like, more on the software side, we see companies like Siriact who can like increase picking efficiency and effectivity of picking robots. We see companies like Finext who take care of heterogeneous robot fleets, right, making them work together, and so on and so forth. So they're a very different and a variety of angles to approach that. So to conclude with all this, so where does that take us? I want to conclude with a few theses that we have about the space and how we look at it. And this is 4 core things. We could probably add a few more, but basically in warehouse automation, the key to unlock hesitant potential clients, and oftentimes it's SMEs who are more hesitant because they have smaller budgets, right? Is a CapEx sensitive business model. That means you need modularity in your solution approach, and you need a hardware agnostic software approach oftentimes. Because for all the players out there who have big pockets, right, and big warehouses, there are feasible and good solutions out there with AutoStore and so on. But the ones that don't use automation at all are usually a little bit smaller. And value is created through software, while hardware is becoming a commodity. And for us, that's also true for all the different kinds of robots that move like different things around, or do different tasks. Then the second one is we do see room for new logistics service providers. We've seen some very interesting business models when it comes around to for example for yard trucking, so moving trucks on the yard autonomously with even also with other hardware, right? But it's a software and it's a service use case, or with pay-per-pick robots, right? You could think about not selling the robots at all, but just like selling the service. And these models can have venture potential because you have a marginal cost of work, right? You can just use them forever and utilize their capacity. We don't see a long-term opportunity in all things recruiting and staffing. There have been interesting business models in the past, but we think we are, when it comes to technological readiness, we are too far along the road to still look at another, I don't know, marketplace for truck drivers or something like this. So this is not for us. But still, there will be a human workforce in the warehouses of the future, because the adoption of the industry, both trucking and warehousing, when it comes to automation and to new technology, is rather slow. Right, the industry will move step by step. So everything that is happening at the intersection of human workforce and robots, communicating between both, coordinating tasks between both, and ensuring that a workflow is executed smoothly, is indeed interesting. And there we are in the middle layer, right, of increasing workflow effectiveness and efficiency. I think that's it from my part. Happy to answer any questions, get your thoughts around the whole topic. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Markus. It was super interesting, and I myself have experience with Amazon FBA and have felt the pain firsthand. So I know how 20 books can get lost, or even sofas in Amazon. So at Amazon warehouses. So yeah. Super interesting. Perhaps, Mike, do you want to kick the Q&A off with your questions?
All right. Yeah, Thanks a lot. Maybe I can do that. Yes. So I think you already partially answered the question, but like as far as I understand, in the industry or your personal view is that you think that automated truck driving, basically autonomous trucks, will not come fast enough to deal with the shortage of truck drivers that's going to appear basically in the next 10 years, right? So if these 33% of workforce go away, automated truck driving will not be fast enough to deal with that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it depends. I think the tech will be fast enough. I think the regulation probably won't be. So because we have a shortage, already today, right? And how we try to solve it at the moment is import workforce from Eastern Europe, right? So that's what we try to do at the moment, but that just like shifts the problem geographically. And so yes, I think the autonomy will not be there fast enough, at least not available for practical way. But eventually, it is the solution to the problem, right? The very obvious solution.
Right. Okay.
Just quickly, Philip, before I hand it over to you, because this is like one of my questions actually. How much does the local aspect also play a role? Like, and also how does this affect actually expansion? Like, how different are is the ecosystem Europe versus, for example, the US or Asia? Perhaps you can touch upon this.
Yeah, I mean, even within Europe, you have a few geographical differences, right? And they are multi-layered. So, for example, one is like just like, even if it's not super deep, but the openness for using technology, right? And the tech savviness of people, right? We saw that with like not even talking about automation, but we saw that for years in logistics, if you tried to sell German logistics SME software as a service product, they would continuously ask you why they should pay every month for software, because like usually they pay once, right? And then they have like a license for a year. And we see that also due to the age structure of the workforce, but also of the owners, right? And in Eastern Europe, there was sometimes a smoother adoption because you have more younger entrepreneurs on the logistics side. So you have geographical differences there. Another thing there is that we're shifting more and more with like other jobs that are available also for not highly skilled people. We're shifting, we are creating other options for workers, right? So if you have the choice of doing a white collar job of any kind, or waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning, driving outside of the city to a cold warehouse, right? And then like do manual labor there, you would probably pick most of the other jobs offered to you, which are white collar jobs, over that, right? We see the same in construction happening, right? It's just like not a job that a lot of people like to do. And I think in Europe that might be a little bit more severe than, for example, in APAC. You still find workforce there, but the shortage is happening globally. Like the problem is happening globally. Just how severe it is a little bit different, and how tech savvy the people are, and how easily they adopt new technology is different. And we see, like, for example, in China, we see a lot more tech savviness when it comes to automation of warehouses, for example, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Philip, you want to ask your question?
Yeah. From what you mentioned on your last slide in regards to, hardware is everything over, let's say, or hardware is a commodity. I found that was super interesting. Is it, let's say, the idea worthwhile to be, let's say, a warehouse provider to, let's say, given that the CapEx is too large and you can just rent out these warehouses with the capacity to like offer that in let's say, whatever scalability you provide, and the only, or not the only, but let's say the major factor would be local regulations that you have to adjust to? Is that something that has been picked up to some extent?
Yeah, to some extent. If I got you correctly, then yes. You have, for example, so partially, I would say partially. So the idea of like providing flexible warehousing space on demand, also like in different locations to one customer, and making them independent of their headquarters, for example. That is not you. That is happening in logistics. For e-commerce, for example, you have players like Bird with a key value.
Exactly, but not Bird, which is like renting out the space for you, but more like, we need a warehouse now, like we need a logistics hub now, and we have that for you. Yeah,
you see a few of these concepts there. I mean, with Bird or Hive or so, you can have like decentralized logistics and decentralized fulfillment. You have other players like Unbound in Germany, who like try to offer unutilized space in existing warehouses to the ones that need it right now. But what you oftentimes don't have there is, these warehouses are usually not super highly automated there, right? But it's like you still have the manual labor issue, and you can tackle that to an extent by equipping a local workforce. But then the question is, who operates it? And the most of the digital players who are in the market today don't operate these warehouses, right? For example, Bird does not operate a single warehouse, right? They have partners, and they have their own WMS system that they use for their partners, but then the partners decide how to operate and what to automate and what not. The offering of like an automated warehouse as a service might be worth considering, and you could like operate them more profitably than using human workforce. The risk really is that it really depends on what you're handling, which kind of automation you can use, right? If you have, for example, like, I don't know, fixed shelf spaces, right? You can use them for a small e-commerce item, but if you handle, I don't know, a chainsaw that you send around, it's a little bit more difficult, maybe, right? And that means like you would have to find a very flexible and a setup, an automation setup that is usable for many different kind of things, and also workflows within the warehouse, even if it's semi-human workflows that are adaptable and easily adaptable to different requirements of customers when it comes to, for example, packing goods, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, Simran, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Markus, for the presentation. I really found it very insightful. I was wondering again about the market adoption. You mentioned that the EBIT margins are generally between 3 to 7%, and I was just surprised that since it's such a capital capex intensive industry, wouldn't that already be good enough? I mean, did it mean that they can afford to lose that kind of margin at the cost of not adopting an optimization technology? So could you maybe elaborate on that a bit?
You mean that if they like, you mean like the 4% to 7% margin, just to check if I understood your question correctly, you mean the 4% to 7% margin would be enough to cover the cost anyway, so you cannot kind of lose too much?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, wouldn't that be affordable enough for them to still consider using this kind of optimization?
Yes, but I mean, you cannot make too many mistakes in calculating the whole thing, right? So because there's zero buffer, right? So there's really like low margin for error. And especially if we're talking about like smaller automation projects, yes, definitely, right? If we talk about like let's automate one area, let's use automated forklifts in one area, for example, right? Or let's put in one area, let's put robots to work that move shelves around, then totally. But if we talk about the more established automation concepts like AutoStore, right? That is 0 or 1. You have like an AutoStore kind of concept, which in the end consists of high racks and robots autonomously driving around in these racks and retrieving items. And you cannot scale that up or down. You can scale it up and down a little bit by the number of robots, but essentially you need the whole thing to work, right? And there is a very high minimum investment. And if you have like a 15 to 20% EBIT margin business, and you lose I don't know, 5% due to bad calculation, right? You still make profits. And as a managing director, but also as a logistics operations manager, it still sucks, but you can somehow sell that to shareholders, right? You can maybe say, okay, well, this is an investment for now, but we will recover the margins in the future. If it's really deciding about like profit or loss for the whole business, then it's that's a little bit more difficult, and people are just hesitant to do that.
Yeah. So I guess the long-term vision is missing a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Is there actually, Markus, a startup, if you could wish for a startup to be built, like where you say, I'm just looking for this one, that someone builds such and such solution. Do you have one on your chest where you would be like, can someone just build this, please?
That's interesting. Actually, yes. I mean, we are currently diving into the WMS space and looking at a few players. But yes. So if we would find a new generation of WMS software that is almost plug and play with like very lean implementation cycles, that is customizable by the end users, and works with open APIs, because like the API stuff is also for more established automation providers, like think of Kion or Jungheinrich in Germany, right? These industrial companies that have robots. Even for them, it's really a pain to integrate their existing robots. The hardware works, right? But the hardware needs to get the job information from the software in order to be operational, right? And even for them, it's really hard to build the 101st integration into a niche WMS system, right? So at the moment, I think really rolling up the WMS market and just like giving it an update, a 0.0, that would be good. And what it would need is as I said, you would need to find a way to really set up a plug and play system, have standard APIs to the most commonly used automation technologies, but at the same time you need standard APIs to shop systems, ERP systems, and so on and so forth. And you need to find a way to address your target customers very, very smartly. But that would be interesting. And in terms of automation tech and robotics, I think there's a lot of potential in the positioning as a solution provider, and I think a few startups are moving in that direction. But if you combine the ability to steer and control heterogeneous robot fleets with the ability to also like to provide them like a variety of types of robots as a service, so not be the hardware provider, but having contracts with the hardware provider, not needing an implementation partner, but really being the solution provider towards a customer. That's more positioning kind of task, because like the fleet management aspect is solved by a couple of companies. There's a few technical latency issues with cloud deployments of robots, but I think also solvable. But it's really a positioning task, and if more companies would do that, there would be like, I think, great potential in warehouse automation, but also in yard automation.
Yeah, both super interesting and makes total sense when also thinking of the target group, and as you said, also the cultural background.
Because like when it comes to adoption, and also when it comes to scaling of existing I don't want to point fingers, but there's a lot of companies, software companies in the robotics space, for example, that do kind of fleet management and that help their customers to implement robot fleets. But one of the key components there is try to implement an automation project if you need like 4 or 5 parties involved, right? The robot manufacturer, a systems integrator, the WMS company who doesn't offer a standard API, and then also like the operational logistics people. And then on top, you want to like add your fleet management, whatever job distribution software, right? It's just super complex, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work, and in the time you need it to work, right? So therefore, you need, and that's all the parts are there, but you need to combine them in a smart way and in a capital efficient way, and in a way that the end customer wants.
Yeah, Mike, you wanna? You're still muted.
Sorry. Thanks. So I have 2 more questions. Number one is, you've been saying that, like people don't want to do this job, right? Because it's waking up so early, but there is a shortage, right? Do you observe that the market plays it out so that basically the wages of truck drivers rise sharply? Have you looked into like this? Not, I don't know.
Yeah, there is. I mean, yes, there's different angles. There's pretty good data from the US. Where you can like look at increases of wages for warehouse workers, and actually they've risen more than the average in peak times. You have a lot of seasonality in the US when it comes to warehouse workers anyway, right? You have like economic cycles, but then you also have like peak seasons for Christmas, for example, right? Where the demand increases and also wages increase a little bit. And what you also see is more benefits, and there's a few studies out there when it comes to employee engagement and really like making people feel better about like the job and the work they're doing, and more appreciation and easing communication and so on and so forth. So I think there is a certain movement, but I think it's not enough. I think the market is moving not enough to really balance that at full scale, and it's also a cultural thing. It's not. I think if you would try to solve the issue by selling to warehouse operators a solution where they could, I don't know, cater more to their employees' needs, then you would just like earn confused views, right? They would look at you and say, okay, well, employee engagement, what is that? What is that like? I don't need anyone to be happy. I need people to get their job done, right? So that is the mentality you're confronted with. And I think in terms of wages, you sometimes see it, but also with wages, there is a very small margin that you can give up, right? If you have like a business 3 or 5% EBIT margin, you can only pay so much, right? And you see that sometimes in logistics, you saw that you see it that prices are more and more forwarded to the end consumers, right? And we also see that when it comes to fulfillment, for example. Think about paying for returns, right? Now it's a thing with a few shops. I don't know, 10 years ago or so, it was not a thing at all, right? And also, or maybe paying for shipments, right? So a lot of stores, like even 3-4 years ago, wouldn't have you pay for shipments. Now you have shipment cost, or you have shipment cost if you send things back, and so on and so forth, right? So and why you have that? Because the cost of fulfillment is rising, because people get higher wages and so on and so forth. But it's also a reaction to minimum wages, for example, right?
And now my second question, I don't know if it's a little bit stupid, but somebody told me today there are no stupid questions. Like if I think about the history of AWS, right? What Amazon did there is like said, hey, look, we built some infrastructure that everybody needs, so let's give it to everybody. So why doesn't Amazon do exactly the same with its infinite experience building warehouses? Because I don't know, I talked to Rocco, like, you know, a couple of times, and he said, you know, like in the last 20 years, we 10x kind of our efficiency. Otherwise, you would need to hire 500,000 warehouse workers in Germany. That's impossible, right? Why don't they make a business like AWS out of it?
I mean, they somehow did with FBA, right? I mean, okay. I mean, not exactly, because also their warehouses are not 100% automated, but I would say that on average they are more automated than the average warehouse, right? So it's 2 averages, but I think they are a little bit further there. I think for them they are more profitable fields of business than logistics sometimes. I mean, they've expanded with their warehouse structure and their capacity heavily in the COVID times, and then reduced it again. But there are companies doing that. There's Ocado, for example, in the UK. You can Google them. They started as an e-grocery store, right? So a supermarket, an online supermarket, and it's a very tough business because you have low margins and then you have logistics costs on top, right? So with basket sizes and so on and so forth. And they started as an online supermarket, and what they do now is still being an online supermarket, but sell automation technology and automation concepts to others. So they are really high on everything robotic. There's a few cool videos on YouTube. You can check them out.
Thanks.
I hope I shared the right
link. I think it's the right one. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, Leon.
All right, thanks for sharing all that insights, Markus. You already mentioned that kind of the most interesting area is automation, right? And if you now would need to pick kind of just investing into automation in the area of warehousing or transportation, what would be your pick and maybe why?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in transportation, I would not try to invest due to competitiveness and capital needed, and also like maturity of the market. I would not invest in a company that just enables trucks to drive autonomously, like doing navigation and the recognition of objects and so on and so forth. I would either pick another area. I mean, like we just recently invested with First Momentum, right, and Skyflow, like a drone delivery service provider, right, enabling another like kind of area of transportation to work. I think there might be some potential in delivery robots, but if we stick with trucking, and if we really stick with like the trucking lane, I would rather look at companies that do, but I think it's a little bit early still for that. But in the future, I would rather look for companies that do fleet management, and either fleet management components, which allow you to optimally utilize your autonomous trucks, or that at the intersection of autonomous trucks and other systems. For example, you need to communicate ETAs to a warehouse, right? And then you have like different autonomous systems, even either autonomous system to autonomous system or autonomous system to any kind of other system to share information, right? So let's imagine a fully automized world. There you would have autonomous forklifts unloading a truck when it arrives, right? But in order to make a smooth workflow happen, they need the information when the truck arrives, what's in there, and they need real-time updates, ideally, to just like also assign their own capacity in an optimal way. I think communication there is super interesting. Can be different business models, right? Can be more of an API business, could be like a yard management business that combines both. I think that is a very interesting field. In terms of warehouse automation, I mean, we made an investment in a British company that combines fleet management with robot deployment via cloud. There's a technological aspect to the cloud deployment part, as you have a latency issue with bigger fleets. So yeah, we've placed an investment there. And as I said, we look into the WMS system to just like enable the necessary data layer for automation, right? I think this is super interesting, and we find everything interesting that does job distribution to autonomous systems, but also like allows to control efficiency and scale autonomous structures up and down to like that allows you in the end to install another robot here or automate another task there, while parts are still done by human workforce, right? So to have that mixed approach there, you need like good software to steer that, to distribute tasks, to monitor everything. I think this is an interesting area. There's already a few companies doing these kind of things, but sometimes it's also a positioning thing, as I mentioned, right?
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Super good. I have two questions also left on my notes. Do you think in the future, basically fully automated warehouses will eat the legacy warehouses as they're so slow on adapting to automation?
Yeah, I think partially yes, but it won't be a 0-to-1 switch. I think yes. I think like, I don't know, in 100 years from now, you will have logistics service providers that invested more heavily in automation, right, than others, and they will outcompete others, but just because of the prices they can offer, right? Because in the end, robots don't demand minimum wages. So you have like a natural price competitive advantage in pricing. So yes. But I think it's a process, so it won't happen. Like, I mean, if there was a secret source of like outcompeting everyone with like an automated warehouse, we would already see a few players doing that, right? It's a rather complex issue. I really truly believe that we will see another, I don't know, 10, maybe 15 years of a combination of human workforce and robots, right? Parts being automated, parts not, also depending on the goods that are handled, for example, and so on and so forth. So I believe there is a competitive advantage in automation, definitely, but we will just see a slow adoption and a slow the automation players pushing the others out slowly.
Yeah, and is there how are the founding teams actually in logistics different to perhaps other fields also? Is there anything, or would you say it's pretty the same?
No, I don't think it's the same. And it's a question we often discuss internally. The question they are sometimes like it depends. You have these the standard founders like with, I don't know, consulting backgrounds or something like that, that like now discover entrepreneurship for them and like are good executors and so on and so forth. But you also have a lot of engineers, right? Because like when like people that work, for example, when it comes to warehouse automation, also consultancies for warehouse automation, often the people are more like engineering heavy in terms of their profiles, right? And you see, I would say, in that automation space, you see less good salespeople. Which is often, I mean, it's hard to talk in stereotypes, right? But it's more commonly than not, it's a thing that founding teams are missing, like good sales capabilities and a good venture fit of the people in a very classic sense, because they solve a problem from an engineering perspective sometimes, but like not thinking of it at scale. But the other thing that you sometimes have is that you also need a little bit of a different sales persona here and there to sell to logistics operation managers, right? If you sell to warehouse managers, then it's a total like different breed of people than selling to, I don't know, big enterprise whatever white collar workers, right? So to like be able to speak their language, understand their language, and so on and so forth, sometimes requires a different type of sales founder persona, I would say. So yeah, they are sometimes a little bit more engineering heavy. Yeah, sometimes also like a little bit trapped into in the logistics world, but not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Mike, I think let's go for the last question, and then.
Sorry, I just like when you talk,
no.
things pop up. They are quite interesting. You said like 100 years from now. That popped to my head. Like, what's your kind of insight or point of view like on humanoid robots working in warehouses, right? Because like there's a big push now. Like, I mean, Tesla doing their Primus. I mean, there is like I forgot how this startup that got like new funding right now in Silicon Valley, right? So like there's a big push towards that. How far ahead do you see this in the warehouse use case, and how useful do you see it there?
It's a good question. I don't have a very educated opinion on that, but still, I think you can automate pretty much in a warehouse and pretty many tasks in a warehouse without humanoid robots, like with the existing robots, right? There might be cases, but I'm not exactly sure where they would add like a huge benefit over existing systems, and maybe they could at someday they could be used more flexible, and then you could just use one of them instead of like three other types of robots. Yes, but I think like the technological readiness is not in terms of like practical use cases they can do is not where the technological readiness and practical readiness of other robotic systems is at the moment. I mean, it's developing rapidly, right? So maybe in a year from now, you will hear me say different things. But I think at the moment, also with the companies we are seeing in Europe, I mean, we have a very European view sometimes, right? This is our own focus, but in Europe we don't see any of these players with a strong logistics focus at all at the moment. Right, and we see a lot of all the other players, right, and that also means that they will go to market more quickly than the humanoid robots, and yeah, can take it from there.
Thanks.
Okay, really final question. Simran, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was just curious, Markus, because I'm also coming from the drone background, and you mentioned Skyflow. So I was wondering what was the vision behind investing in them, because given the regulatory hurdles right now with urban operations, it's quite challenging in EU. And I'm wondering if they focus on a different market, or how come you came about investing in them?
Yeah, we've been looking at the drone space for like forever, I think. So like in my very first venture job in 2017, one of the people at the first firm I was working for invested in a drone startup, and they don't took off, pun not intended. But obviously, right, it was like too early. We think like the technology in terms of like hardware is ready, is out there. There's still new companies building new drones, and yeah, but like the technological technology is ready. It's just a question of timing, I think. And there were a few regulatory updates last year where the European Commission changed their views on certain safety aspects in terms of like what is the population density of areas you can fly over, and so on and so forth. And Skyflow managed to get a license to operate specific population densities in Ireland, which is applicable in all the European Union. And you don't necessarily have to deal too much with local authorities anymore. And that was basically, we think there is a first mover advantage. Like the business case they're focusing on, they start with medical logistics. That's not a secret. There are many other players like having identified that. It's a market for sure. But we see the concept working in the UK. There's a company called Appian. They work with the NHS. It's rather successful so far. It's rather successful, I would say. And I think Skyflow has a first mover advantage in Germany. They are regulatory. They're compliant with the regulation. They've showed that they are now operationally live in Germany. So, and you can do that in Germany. Like Germany is one of the more conservative markets, right? There's other markets within the European Union, like Ireland, who are more open to innovation. So basically, there was it, like having the regulatory edge, the compliance edge there, and the idea of not building own hardware, but rather providing the infrastructure to operate hardware yourself as a service provider, but also to enable others to be drone couriers, right? Without the need of developing own drones. That was the idea.
Cool. Yeah,
similar to what you had proposed for basically the warehouse.
Yeah. I mean, it's very similar. It's very similar there. Yeah. Only the infrastructure, but not necessarily hardware.
Yeah, exactly. Just owning basically the customer relationship and being the solution provider, as you called it. Yeah, exactly. Skyflow is doing the same. Thank you so much, Markus, for this really interesting talk. And as you can see also from the discussion, super interesting topic.